Hello, and welcome back to My Time with Lynn. I'm Spencer Cross. This is episode 12. We have a very special guest, someone I've been excited to have on the show for a long time. We finally schedules worked out. The super thoughtful, intelligent, kind David Dixon. Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Hi, Spencer. I'm doing well.
Awesome. Start with a compliment from a mutual friend. I won't say her name, but it's a mutual female friend that I saw recently, so I think you'll know who it is. I told her you were coming on the show, and she said, "Oh man, Dave, I was always just so intimidated by Dave, and just how deeply smart and thoughtful, and like, and we're just joking about like, yeah." And I said, like, "Yeah, me too. Like, you don't want to like misspeak. You want to just have like you inspired us to be very like specific with our thoughts, to be very thorough with our thoughts, because you had that just that deep, thoughtful mindset, which I think she and I both really appreciated. So for what that's worth, that was you struck fear into the minds of your friends in a good way.
Oh no.
Not fear. You inspired rigor in the minds of your friends. Let's put it that way. But
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, so I want to start with that. And I think we'll just start. You're saying you want to start with talking about how you joined.
That's right. Yeah. So in your first episode, you said you were unsatisfied with what was available for people who were not in the movement with us, um, that exists for them to try and understand what this was all about. And so for the audience who might be watching that doesn't share our experiences, I wanted to try and help them understand where we're coming from, how we understood what we were doing. And then also for the audience of people who were there with us, um, I wanted to just give some background that may help them understand who I was as they encountered me in the movement. So different audiences, I'll try to square that circle. Um, but I ran into the organization in February of 2005. Most of the people that I knew in Los Angeles when I joined, who were members there, joined prior to that. They joined during the 2004 presidential campaign. So I joined after that. And there was a different energy, I'd say. And the energy was apparent when I ran into them. El Camino College in Torrance, California.
Nice.
My friend and I came out of a class. I don't remember what class it was, what we were taking. I don't remember much of anything from school at that time. But I remember coming out and walking into the main, like, courtyard of the school, and it was like midday. So, it's a community college and a commuter school. The place clears out during the middle of the day.
hmm
It's dead afternoon. And like, you get a night crowd that comes in. But during the day, yeah, it's just an very empty place. So we walk out of the building. We're looking into this long, empty courtyard. And like 40 feet in front of us is a card table with four people standing basically on every side of the card table, looking in opposite directions, not talking to each other at all. And there's a poster of Arnold Schwarzenegger giving the Heil Hitler salute
Yep.
and a bunch of like stuff on this table, uh, disorganized, just sort of like thrown on the table. And we're walking out, and I stop. And for some reason, maybe it was just so funny to me, or uh, like the idea of these people being there doing something weird was so
Hmm.
exciting that I ended up shouting, I've got to talk to these people. And at that, then all of them turned and looked at us. And you like I said, there's like no one on campus. So it's just them 40 feet away. Like my friend and I over here looking at them. Um, he and I had different experiences. We came away with different judgments of
Okay.
what this was after we came up and talked to the organizers. I talked to someone who was really, really smart, uh, said some stuff that I superficially agreed with.
Hmm.
I would say we agreed that the economy that something wrong was wrong with the economy.
Hmm.
We had different reasons, and of course, we didn't talk about what those reasons were. We just sort of like we're like, yeah, everything's messed up.
Yeah.
And then she showed me like math and some like geometry stuff, and I was
Yeah.
like, uh-huh, uh-huh. And I'm thinking, you know what? You're pretty cute. I'm okay. Sure, you want my number? Sounds good to me.
Sure.
Um, and then my friend and I walked to his car, and he's like, those people are insane. That was so weird. And
Hmm.
I was like, really? Like, I just thought that was cool. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Um, um, and then he was happy to support the idea that like I thought the girl was cute.
Hmm.
So,
Common ground.
uh, you know, I got a phone call a couple days later and invited to a meeting. And I was like, sure, okay. Yeah, I'll go to your meeting. Um, it was on the complete opposite end of Los Angeles from me.
Hmm.
So I live in the South Bay area of LA County.
Hmm.
The office was in Los Angeles, like on the board. It was like, I think it was in Eagle Rock.
Eagle Rock and right by Glendale. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was on the border of Eagle Rock and Glendale.
Hmm.
And on the other side of the Hollywood Hills, it took me like 45 minutes driving,
Sure.
get there. I get there at night. It's winter time, so it's already dark when I get there at like 7.
Hmm.
And it was weird. It was like I got off the freeway and then immediately like there's this big hill with nothing on it, and then this rundown old business building.
Yeah.
Uh, so it looks more like an old warehouse or something. I don't know. Like it
It
was a
did.
business at one point.
Yeah.
Um, so anyways, I get there a little late and I walk, like park, and then I walk up to the back of the building, and I don't know how to get into this place. I've never been there before.
It's not clear for the outside.
No, there's no sign.
There's nothing.
There's no like clearly marked entrance.
Hmm.
So I kind of walk to the front of the building and like nothing's going on, but there are lights. So I'm like, someone's in there. And then the back door, well, let me put it, there's like a back door, and then there's a second back door
Yeah.
that's there as an entryway to this main room.
Right. Right.
Only that back door was open,
Hmm.
and it was surrounded by like 3 or 4 people smoking.
Yeah.
And they're out there smoking because they can't be in the meeting. So I walk up and I'm like, hi, no one's talking to me because the meeting's already happening. And I look in, and this room is packed.
Yeah.
It is totally packed. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm in the right place, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, I don't remember what the meeting was about.
Hmm.
I think I remember who gave the presentation.
Yeah.
Um, but then the meeting ended and this other back door opened. So I went into this mysterious building,
Hmm.
and I'm just passing people in the hall. this place is dirty. It's got piles of bundles of pamphlets
Yep.
and other literature, and you know, it doesn't look like a legitimate business.
Right.
And so I'm trying to find the person who invited me to the meeting.
Hmm.
Looking around, I'm asking, this person is not there. Like, who invites you to their meeting and
Classic.
then doesn't show up?
Classic.
But anyway, it didn't take long for someone to come up and say, "Who are you?" You know,
Hmm.
like, what are you doing here? And this person was very good at sort of giving me a tour of everything and everyone that was interesting or impressive in this office.
Nice.
You know, so I saw people um, giving like little mini presentations on little math things. And I was like, okay. And they're like showing me dioramas and like sculptures of things. There's a big grand piano. Um, we go walking through, we walk into this room that's got like a bunch of it's an ad hoc phone bank.
Yep.
And this place was just like destroyed, destroyed. Like the nothing's organized. The floor has probably got holes in it.
Yeah.
Um, and there's this big whiteboard with just like hundreds of names listed on it.
Hmm.
And the person talking to me is like, I'm just gonna put your name on here, okay? And I'm like, sure. It's like 100 and something bucks to come. You'll come, right? I'm like, I am, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and then, I saw some people working on computers doing stuff, and it was all really interesting. It was very impressive.
And these are all
And
young people too.
all young people, like I came away with this sense that like, all right, these are serious uh political activist people. This is so
Hmm.
romantic. This is like out of a MTV documentary about like the 1960s or something. Like this
Sure.
is this is something. Um, what I didn't know at the time is that the reason the place was so packed was because, like I mentioned, I got my name written on the board to attend what they called their President's Day conference. So it's like, okay. That was like the weekend after.
Hmm.
The reason it was so filled is because everyone was a member of the organization. Like it was all these people from the different parts of the West Coast who'd all come to Los Angeles to go to this conference.
Hmm.
Um, when I got there, I didn't know that, so I'm just like, this looks like a serious meeting. Like they've got hundreds of names up on the board, so like this is a real like they're nothing's suspect here, nothing's out of the
Sure.
ordinary.
Sure.
So then, I went home. I got a phone call from different people,
Hmm.
and they, like, you got to come to this conference. Can you come? It's going to be at a hotel. You know, we can help you out. Like, if you can't pay the whole thing, maybe you can like room with some other people who are attending.
Hmm.
Like, okay, sure, I'll come.
Hmm.
Um, so. I went to this conference and I was given two books. One was a book with Dick Cheney on it,
Uh-huh.
looking like he had just taken a bite out of someone,
Yeah.
called The Children of Satan.
Yep.
The other book was much more optimistic. It had a nuclear power plant on it and it said Earth's next 50 years.
Hmm.
So I went to this conference. I spent most of the time reading the Children of Satan book,
Hmm.
like by myself, by myself. And this book had three parts in it, right? It had
Hmm.
like a first part about the Iraq War.
Hmm.
I don't remember what the second part is about. And then the third part is about um like 1950s, 1960s.
Congress for Cultural Freedom, the cultural shift in post World War II into New Age, like the hippies and that side of thing. Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
And so that one is the one that really like did something to me
Sure.
because um I fancied myself a musician. I loved rock music.
Hmm.
Um, I played in bands. That was what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I learned like, oh, it's all fake.
Hmm.
And like this is, I don't remember the exact claims, but I just remember thinking like, I can't like this anymore because there's something really deeply wrong with it and it's meant to like stupefy me
Sure.
and stupefy everyone or infantilize everyone.
Okay.
Um, and that was an existential crisis. Like, who am I?
Yeah.
What am I doing in life? The
So
rest of the conference, yeah,
real quick, just to clarify, are you saying that after reading this pamphlet, the third part, the Congress of Cultural Fascism, I should add for people, if you go to the CIA's website, they have a whole page about the Congress for Cultural Freedom. But like, it's not a secret. Like, it seems super conspiratorial at the time, even to me, who was a member. And I probably was at that meeting you went to. Kind of funny. I was just thinking of, but you're saying that pamphlet led you to the conclusion that like your sort of identity with music was like uh, kind of like a fraud or like illegitimate or something like that to that effect.
yeah,
Okay. Sorry, just want to clarify because it was yeah,
yeah, and like I couldn't like the Beatles anymore.
sure.
Like, oh, um, the rest of the conference was interesting. Um, there was like a whole conference space, a gallery, whatever they call these, like big rooms that
Hmm.
was a showcase for all of these people's projects.
Hmm.
Um, so they had like all these young people, college-aged people.
Hmm.
At the time I was 19.
Hmm.
Uh, so these are all people ostensibly my age or around my age.
Hmm.
And everything I look at is like super, from my point of view, super advanced.
Hmm.
Like, oh, here's this thing that's showing me things about, an ellipse. An ellipse
Hmm.
is a geometrical shape, but it's not just like drawn on paper. No, it's like a little pond,
Hmm. Yeah.
and they've got little like water uh what do you call it? The thing you like drop in
Droppers.
water.
Yeah, like a dropper.
They're dropping water and it's creating ripples that are going out and then they're converging back at the opposite foci.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not just this geometrical thing. There's something fundamental about space
Hmm.
that this is showing. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Someone made what looked like, the uh, um, the high school student science fair project where they put a bunch of baking soda in a volcano and then it explodes. It's
Uh-huh.
supposed to be like the Nawapa,
Oh yeah,
this
yeah. I forget
uh
that big like topographical map, or whatever, topological map.
yeah, so
Yeah.
someone like designed out of plaster or something a topological map
Hmm.
of North America to show how water would come down from, you know,
Alaska and
Canada
Utah,
and
yeah.
Alaska and then flow through canals. Uh, there's all these things going on.
Hmm.
And again, this is really impressive. Like I'm just thinking like I couldn't do this. These people are really smart.
Hmm.
They must know what they're doing.
Hmm.
I went to some of the like keynote speaking things.
Hmm.
Nah,
Sure.
didn't didn't care
Sure.
really.
Sure.
Uh, Lyndon LaRouche spoke at one of them.
Hmm.
I don't remember what he talked about.
Yeah.
I don't remember it being that interesting.
Sure.
But there was a panel with people who were in the youth movement,
Hmm.
and they were all giving these like presentations on papers from the 18th century by like math geniuses and arguing that this is going to help us do theoretical modeling of the economy that's more advanced than anything that's ever been done. And
Hmm.
I'm just kind of stunned by that.
Hmm.
Okay, these, and at the same time, I'm overwhelmed because like I'm having this like hair-raising identity crisis.
Hmm.
So then I go home from this conference. I remember I went to school, I checked out a book by Bertrand Russell
Hmm.
because he's mentioned as one of these evil men,
Sure.
um, a view I do not hold.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
like I
Sure.
remember like I read something and I couldn't really read at this point. Like I couldn't read a philosophy paper
Hmm.
at 19 years old. And so I just got little bits out of it. And then I remember going to class and just like looking out the window, like totally, disconnected from everything going on, staring off into space and just like feeling like my whole world has changed. Like I
Hmm.
don't know what's happening anymore. Maybe like a week later, I discovered a website online called LaRouche Planet.
Hmm.
LaRouche Planet is a website made by people who left the movement. These are all people who are baby boomers.
Hmm.
So at that point, they would have been in their 40s,
Yeah.
and they were hostile
Right.
towards the organization. They had written long, I wouldn't call them essays, but they're like long
Scre
posts.
Screeds.
Some of them may be screeds,
Yeah.
yeah. Some of them, are them gossiping about like what they are hearing
Sure.
through the grapevine about what's still happening. But the main point of all of this was that, like, oh, this is actually a cult.
Right.
And so at this point, I'm like, okay, so I can like rock music again.
Sure.
It's okay. So I like turned on,
It gives you the out.
uh, I remember turning on Paranoid Android by Radiohead in my little like space, my room that I was living in at the time, and I was just like in jubilation rocking out.
Nice.
And I went to a friend's house and I told them they almost got me.
Yeah.
They almost got me. Um, and then some time went by, and I don't remember exactly what was happening in my life, but I was not happy.
Hmm.
And I was pretty depressed. Finally, I picked up the phone. Like they were calling me from
Sure.
this office. They were calling and calling, and I was just ignoring their calls. And finally, I picked up and I was talking to a different organizer,
Hmm.
and I felt guilty. Like, yeah, I've been ignoring your calls. Yeah, I don't want to really come to your meetings.
Hmm.
The meetings I had gone to after this conference were kind of weird because suddenly the number of people there shrank.
Sure.
And then quickly I realized, oh, all these people are the same people. They're just the members here. And then like I'm going into a room with maybe 60 other people my age or
Hmm.
thereabout. But most of them want to talk to me or like two other people they've gotten to come.
Sure.
they can, so if, it's a little bit suffocating
Yeah.
and awkward because, you're the center of attention, but in a weird way.
Hmm.
Um, so, you know, uh, for some reason that I don't really remember, I don't remember why I went back.
Hmm.
And then, you know, I ended up having much more personal conversations
Hmm.
with an organizer. We read some things together, like we read an essay by Friedrich Schiller
Hmm.
called On the Aesthetic Estimation of Magnitude.
Hmm.
And, I didn't get much out of this, but I got like that it was enjoyable to read, and it was
Hmm.
enjoyable to read with someone.
Nice.
And and I wanted to have intellectual conversations about philosophy and history. Um, and, at this point in time, this is 2000, early 2005. George Bush has just been reelected president.
Hmm.
Um, the war in Iraq is not going well. And, there's not a lot of like, uh, I mean, it's not like today or even 10 years ago, but at the time, there was still this sense of like, there's not much out there for people to look forward to.
Sure.
There's just like whatever the next movie's gonna be that comes out.
Right.
Um, and hopefully we'll have an endless series of novel like art projects or products to buy.
Hmm.
Uh, CDs or
Sure.
MP3s at the time.
Yep.
Um, but like I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life.
Hmm.
So, um, what I'd like to do now is I want to kind of like back up. You can ask me any questions here about like this part, but I'd like to like I think though I don't remember exactly what was going through my head when I joined,
Hmm.
I know like the condition of life I was living in.
Hmm.
And I think to understand a lot of what was attractive about this youth movement to me, for people to understand like why would you join something when, like you said in your first episode, if you go and you read the Wikipedia page, maybe there's a grab bag of things that you think proposed by this organization look interesting or good.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a bunch of things that look crazy
Right.
or terrible. Um, it's really hard to understand like why you would, it's like trying to understand why someone becomes a Hare Krishna.
Sure.
Like what gets you there?
Right.
Um, so for me, I think to understand that means like understanding what my life was like before I joined. Um, so yeah, I guess in this second part, I'll go into that and then
Yeah.
come back around and bring those two together.
I'd love
But do
love to
you,
love to hear it. No, no questions right now. I think it makes a lot of sense.
okay. So like I mentioned, I'm from the South Bay of Los Angeles County. Um, I live in Redondo Beach, so I went to Redondo Beach, Redondo Union High School, and I came into this high school from out of the district. Uh, and I really hoped when I came in as a freshman that I would have found my people.
Hmm.
Like I was a surfer and I loved punk rock music and
Hmm.
skateboarding, like any preteen from this area.
Hmm.
And I went to middle school in a more inner, not an inner city, but like a suburb that's not a beach city that doesn't have
Sure.
surfers and has a different cultural orientation.
Hmm.
And of course, my fantasy did not come true. And so I spent a bunch of years kind of like by myself,
Hmm.
uh, self-isolated or sort of alienated from people. Uh, and mostly it was because like, the popular kids were bullies or they're interested in like doing things that I thought were stupid.
Sure.
Um, and so I went the first couple of years like that. And then the school did something unexpected. They put me in drama.
Hmm.
And at first I was angry about this because that's not what I asked for.
Sure.
But then after a little while, I realized, no, drama's fun. I like this. And there's a bunch of weird drama kids in it.
Yeah.
The stereotypes are all true.
Hmm.
And I feel like I've got a small community of friends and people that I can talk to and relate to. At the same time, um, I was sort of old enough to go to punk rock shows, so I was doing that and making some friends there.
Nice.
My senior year of high school was probably like the best year I'd ever had up to that point
Hmm.
because, first of all, there were girls interested in me, which had never happened before.
Nice.
And so, and so like I had you know, basically someone came and asked me out and uh, we started dating and then very quickly I fell in love, but I also think that like I myself pushed myself into being in love.
Sure.
Um, so during the senior year of high school, I had like accomplishments. I starred in the fall play.
Awesome. What play was it?
Um, it was the play Our Town,
Okay. Yeah.
and I was the stage manager.
Nice.
Um, Probably one of the most monotone stage managers in history of the role, but I did it nonetheless. And then we had that year's Battle of the Bands, and I played in two different bands, uh, and that went really well. So it was this really high point after years of being alone and depressed. And at the end of the school year, um, like the very last week of school, there was uh, some domestic issues with my girlfriend and her mother
Mm,
that I won't go into. But basically,
sure.
I got called early one morning and asked to give her a ride to school, and I showed up to her house. She looked like she'd just been in a fight. Um, and then the police showed up,
Mm,
and very quickly the police took the mother's side and then arrested my girlfriend.
mm,
And I was just like, I got to do something. Like,
hmm.
this is crazy. And I went on this like 24 hours of trying to get a hold of her father, anyone I could to help get her out of wherever they were holding her. It's probably like LA County juvenile lockup or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, and then she gets released. The school year ends. And she gets put by the court under house arrest with her grandparents, who are very, you know, they're sort of conservative and they're wealthy and they don't, you know, they're very, my sense at the time was they were very like disciplinarian and strict.
Hmm.
So there was like, I was not going to see her very much. And but that's all I wanted to do. That was like my whole life at
Sure.
that point. Um, and then, what they did let me do is that I could drive her to summer school.
Okay.
So I would drive her to summer school and I'd drive her home. And one morning I'm driving her and I just started crying. And then, she forces me to stop the car and we have this really big emotional conversation where she basically uh pops the bubble because she was smart and she was thinking about her future. And we were about the same age. She was a
Hmm.
little younger than me, but even though we're like very, very close in age, I was in the grade ahead of her.
Hmm.
So she had one more year of high school. And of course, she's thinking like, well, I've got to go to college after that. I've got to get ready. I've got to like take the SAT. I've got to do this and that. I've just graduated high school. None of that is on my mind at all.
Hmm.
I didn't take the SAT or the ACT. I'm surprised I graduated high school. Like, um, and no one has talked to me about what I'm doing next.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, Neither one of my parents are, that involved in my life. And so I'm just stunned. And the upshot of the conversation is, hey, we've got to kind of break up. Uh, and because I was so not just like in love with this person, but really dependent
Sure.
on the lifestyle I built with them, uh, I didn't know at all how to react to this. So I reacted very badly.
Hmm.
Um, at first I did things that I thought were like, this is the romantic
Sure.
idea of what you do after a breakup. You like pretend you're suicidal and you write cryptic things everywhere and you punch walls or, like
Sure.
I did a bunch of these things. Really, I was just like processing what had happened and trying to like get distance. But, you know, everyone was worried about me after a couple weeks.
Hmm.
And finally, the ex-girlfriend at this point comes and like pleads with me to like eat some food.
Sure.
Um, when we broke up, she asked that we still be friends, and I remember I told her I don't think I can, but I'll try.
Hmm.
I don't know why. Like since then, I've learned to become friends with people I've had relationships with. That and like some of my best friends in my life are people I've had relationships with.
Sure.
But at this point, I didn't know how to. I didn't know what I was doing. There was no one telling me this
Yeah.
is how you process grief. This is how you like. These are the positive things you do to like cope with this.
Hmm.
Um, so in the weeks following, I'm trying to be her friend, and since she's under house arrest, we're talking on the phone because that's all we can do.
Sure.
One day, we're having a conversation where she's telling me about how she didn't have that much stuff to do. She's locked, basically like stuck in her grandparents' house.
Hmm.
This old people's home. Like, what are you gonna,
Right.
what are you gonna do? It's not like there's not much to do. So she's like, "Well, I've been doing some exercise. I'm trying to get in shape." And something there, like something happened in my head.
Hmm.
Because from that moment on, I became anorexic.
Wow.
Like I started counting calories. I was eating like 1,000 calories a day
Hmm.
and constantly moving.
Sure.
Right. Like not really going to the gym, but like constantly trying to burn off anything I'm eating.
Hmm.
And I dropped from like 150 something pounds to 130 pounds. And I'm like this little skeleton walking around.
Hmm.
And of course, like I've got friends who are worried about me.
Sure.
Uh, Somehow I found myself in a band with some other friends from high school. And all these guys were like in a band that was really successful. And so they were kind of like role models. And it was a little weird being in a band with your role models.
Hmm.
Um, but we played shows and I would have people come up to me and ask me like if I was taking meth, like was I like what was going on with me? Why did I look the way I looked?
Right.
Um, Oddly enough, I was very self-conscious about like what I was doing and what was happening.
Hmm.
And uh, after maybe like 2 or 3 months, no, it's probably more like 6 or 8 months of being anorexic, like all the stress of living this way kind of like caught up with me. And so I fell into this cycle of like binging and purging food.
Hmm.
uh, and when you have um, a behavioral, when you can call it a behavioral or a mental disorder. But like the thing to stress here is that it's like you have these habits or compulsions. You can't easily resist them.
Sure.
And so it feels like you don't have agency. It feels like you're not in control of yourself.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, as time went on, I became more and more distressed and panicked about what was happening. And I sort of broke down as at maybe like a year after a year and decided like I just want to be happy again. I don't like I want to get over this. I don't know what it's going to take, but I want to get over this.
Hmm.
So, you know, I had a job. I got a job developing rich people's photos from their vacations that were really bad.
That's funny.
Um, and like you get to see what all these people are doing in their lives as you try to make their pictures somewhat decent.
Hmm.
Uh, and then you hand it over to them, and sometimes they yell at you because they didn't come out pristine. And you try to explain to them that you can't, like, it's in your camera, it's what you did. I can't,
Sure.
like, um, one of the things that I started doing to direct my attention away from myself was I started reading about politics.
Hmm.
And when I was in high school, I was attracted to politics because punk rock has just historically also aligned itself with left-wing politics,
Sure.
specifically like anarchist politics.
Hmm.
And so, I thought, well, I'll get back into this. And I started reading Adbusters magazines because they were at the local grocery store.
Uh-huh.
A
Sure.
strange thing like anti-consumerist um cut and paste magazines selling at like Whole Foods.
Sure.
Um and reading these magazines I thought we're really like we're in some big trouble. Like we've got these wars and these are awful,
Hmm.
but also like we're ruining the ecology of we're ruining the ecosystem of the planet and we're doing like all of these things that are really psychologically damaging all of this just made me like sort of depressed
In a different way.
uh, in a different way. And I ended up somehow reading this document called the Project for a New American Century.
Sure.
We had George Rogers on before. He talked about reading this.
Yep.
And so I read this and I was like alarmed because it's like all of these people who are in government at that time,
Sure.
years before they're in government, saying what they want to do. And then look, they're doing it.
It was wild. It was it
And
was
it
wild.
wasn't, and like they had given different reasons to us for why they were doing it. But
Hmm.
in this document, they're basically saying like the United States has to be a global superpower in the 21st century. So
Hmm.
we need to make sure we control these areas of the world. And so if we're going to do that, these countries that have these governments can't be allowed to continue to exist.
Right.
Like we need to have different governments here that will work with us on whatever we say.
Hmm.
uh, Follow the Washington Consensus,
Hmm.
as it was called. And so I remember like talking to my manager at work and like trying to express the world is so messed up and like we need to be doing things about this. And my manager's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Uh, but please, like, can you do your job? Like, are you gonna be okay? So I decided because I thought the world was coming to some kind of end
Hmm.
that I was gonna go to school for the purpose of learning how to preserve parts of, civilization that I thought were valuable.
Hmm.
So when I got there during this first semester, and then like 2 weeks later, I run into this organization,
Sure.
I see something that I'm looking for,
Hmm.
but I also am in a state of psychological vulnerability.
Sure.
I'm not stable. I'm like momentarily stable.
Right.
Um, and I've got this bad habit of like isolating myself for long periods of time, then being very social, then isolating myself and being very social.
Hmm.
Um, and I need structure in my life and I need purpose.
Hmm.
I would have very quickly just failed out of school again because I didn't know how to be a student. I didn't know how to keep a planner. I didn't know how to study for tests. I didn't know, like, I liked writing. I was okay at that, but I didn't know how to write an essay if you asked me to do that.
Right.
Uh, I was proficient at reading, but I was undisciplined. So I wouldn't have been able to like keep up with readings. I
Hmm.
would have read a bunch of stuff, then became bored or, like the like initial motivation would have waned and then I would have been done.
Right.
And I needed, a community of people. So what I found was, hey, here's a community of people. They seem not only like they care about what's going on in the world, but they are highly organized and they're working together. They're helping each other to become better at what they say they need to be able to do skill wise to accomplish goals.
Hmm.
So like I I think that I ended up joining this movement because it was all of those things that I needed or wanted. My friends, like I love my friends from high school. I still know them. They're
Hmm.
amazing, but they didn't understand. Um, you know, and so they sort of just let me go. They didn't
Mhm.
try to fight with me.
Sure.
They kind of like,
They got
you
it.
know, they're like, I don't agree, but okay, okay.
Sure.
Um, so, after joining, I think all of this like initial impression, which was very positive for the most part, except for like a moment when I thought like, oh, this is a cult.
Hmm.
But then I thought all these things they're saying doesn't match my experience of the people that I'm talking to.
Sure.
Um, because I'm only seeing these people at these meetings.
Hmm. Right.
Right?
Right.
Um,
Best face.
um, and then, you know, just being impressed with like the skill level or the intelligence or the beauty of these young people. Um, it sort of like quickly falls away because I'm in this organization I've joined. It was very like abrupt. Like I said, I don't really remember. Like there was no like rational
Sure.
kind of decision here.
Hmm.
Um, and once I was in, I sort of just like fell apart. Like
Okay.
I sort of like fell apart again
Okay.
and spent like months, not going out with the rest of the members to campuses or post offices or places of high foot traffic where you can stop people and talk to them.
Hmm.
Um, and I sort of wrestled with my eating disorder again.
Hmm.
Um, and there were also some like finally some like moments of criticism that came into my mind about the people, like because I did go out with them on what we call deployments.
Hmm.
Um, and I would realize these people don't know what they're talking about.
Sure.
We're handing people these pamphlets. You should know what's in the pamphlets.
Yeah.
And you should, like everyone joined for different reasons.
Hmm.
Um, there's probably a lot of similarity, but most of what these young people in this movement are talking to people out in the street about is whatever excites them about this organization.
Right.
And for a lot of them, that was, hey, I'm really interested in music, and I want to tell you about how like the human vocal apparatus is structured according to discoverable principles.
Right.
Or I want to talk to you about um, algebra, or
Hmm.
I want to talk to you about nuclear power.
Hmm.
Or, but like if someone comes up to the table because they see a poster of Arnold Schwarzenegger and you're out there on a campaign to get people to recall Arnold Schwarzenegger or oppose Arnold Schwarzenegger or
Hmm.
call their congressman because Republicans are trying to privatize Social Security.
Hmm.
Um, and you don't know what's in the news. That's a problem.
Sure.
You can't be successful at what your goals are.
Sure. Yep.
Um, and so there was like things like that began to like take the shine off.
Yep. There's
Um,
disconnects.
so the first like year and a half that I was a member of this organization was sort of me like stabilizing myself again.
Hmm.
And so during this time, I was very like self-isolating. I didn't talk to a lot of people. I probably looked like I was always sad and mopey. Uh, one of the um, one of the like leading members of the Los Angeles local, which by mid 2005 had about 120 members,
It was huge.
120 people
Hmm.
every day coming in, being deployed in groups of 4 or 5. So divide 120 by 5, and then subtract 10 people. And that's how many people are driving out every single day to all
Hmm.
these different locations in LA County or San Diego, Orange County or Ventura County, right? So this group of people is having a serious political impact
Hmm.
just by having visibility.
Sure. We were the only
Um,
people out there for most of it, you know? There wasn't really other groups or anything.
yeah, like there's the anti-war movement
Sure.
at
But
the
they're
time.
they're having little marches and stuff and yeah.
Los Angeles is so big and so sprawling that if you're not in like downtown LA on this day, you're never going to see the anti-war people.
Sure. Sure.
And if unless you're like on some campus and you
Hmm.
just happen to go by the RevComs
Hmm.
on the Wednesday they decide to show up, you're never going to see any other political organization.
And this
All you're
pre-social
going
me
to see
social
is
media
like
too. So yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no social media,
Hmm.
right? You see you like you know more about the world through like the like trashy posters that people uh glue to the wall,
Right. Right. Right.
right?
Sure.
At
Sure.
this time.
Especially in LA. Yeah.
Um, so it anyway, so there's a lot of people that I was in this organization with. Um, Sometimes I wonder like what they thought about me because I was so like separated from them,
Hmm.
like not socializing with them a lot. Of course, I had a car, and so I would drive people on deployments, and we went.
Hmm.
Um, and the one thing that I kept up with every day was the briefing. The
Sure.
briefing is this compilation of news stories from newspapers all over the US and Europe, English versions of maybe like Al Jazeera,
Hmm.
or I guess there wasn't. Al Jazeera is not a newspaper, but like, like
Yeah.
Arab media, you know, Chinese, Japanese newspapers.
Hmm.
So there's a group of people in this organization. What they do every day is they wake up, they read 5 newspapers, pick out the news stories that they're assigned to focus on,
Hmm.
and then write summaries of them. And this gets all compiled together with like uh, a leading sort of little mini
Editorial
text
kind of thing.
editorial that
Yeah.
tells you like here's the spin of the day, or
Sure.
spin has a maybe like a negative connotation, but here's like your focus for the day or the
Right.
week. These are this is the details about the campaign we're working on,
Hmm.
um, other strangely internal issues that
Sure.
were oftentimes like cryptic or vague.
Sure.
Um, but like I read this thing every day and I knew what the news was.
Hmm.
So maybe I talked to people about the news.
Sure.
Like I knew what was happening in the news. Um, so I think it's like if you like from the outside, and it's like this with anything. Like you look at people who are in any of the various trends in politics today or the last 10 years, from the outside, it's really hard to understand why someone might become a social justice warrior,
Hmm.
uh, an incel, a member, like a follower of the QAnon,
Sure.
uh,
Any of the pills.
any of the, yeah.
Mm.
Um, and social media is obviously a different environment than the environment that existed when this youth movement blew up in the early 2000s.
Right.
But, I think to understand, like, first of all, there's a lot of positive stuff going on that attracts people.
Hmm.
And then there's always something that is wrong with the world or wrong with someone's life that brings them to be attracted to those things.
Sure.
Um, and it might be a little weird to like think of, so here, like, if you're on the outside, you're wondering what we did on a daily basis.
Hmm.
What we did is we woke up, we came in to this office,
Hmm.
sat down, some older guy gave us basically the summary of the news. Then
Right.
we read this briefing, or we didn't. Most people didn't. Then we piled into cars because we were told by, you know, other of us,
Hmm.
other youth members, you're going to the Hollywood Ralphs today, or
Right.
you're going to UCLA today.
Hmm.
Um, and your goal is to, talk to people, raise a certain amount of money because we need to pay for things.
Sure.
You got to pay for the gas, you've got to
Hmm.
pay for your dinner,
Hmm.
and then, or your rent.
Hmm.
And then we're trying to build a movement. What that ends up being used for at this point, we don't know. Like this movement is being used to grow this movement.
Sure. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
basically it.
That's all you need to
But
know.
right, so like go out, get phone numbers. Like
Hmm.
if you've stopped and talked to um, Greenpeace or CalPERG or
Save the children or those
Save the
groups. Yeah.
Children, that's what we're doing. We're clipboarding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe some things that are a little weird, do you think, is that we're coming back in the evening and we're doing vocal warm-ups to
Hmm.
sing uh, music from Johann Sebastian Bach.
Hmm.
Okay, that's a little weird.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, I was in drama and we did musicals, so we did warm-ups and then we sang weird stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and if you think all of pop culture is sort of like bad for you,
Hmm.
right? Then this is totally a normal, natural thing to do. It's like, well, some music's got to be good. I can't lose all music. We've got
Yeah.
to have music,
Sure.
right? Um, and we're not going to college,
Hmm.
so we've got to keep learning. We've got to have some education.
Hmm.
So people are spending time reading dialogues by Plato, or so they're reading things that would be part of what is today, you know, thought of as like the classical education of like a liberal arts college,
Sure.
like St. John's
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. The classical
Minus
education.
minus like some overt Catholicism, but
Sure.
that's basically what people thought the curriculum was. And then there's some mystical um, or uh, confused understanding of why we're doing all of this, but
Hmm.
it's to make a better world.
Sure.
And what that better world is can look very funny to one person or another.
Sure.
Maybe it looks like, you know, but that's like that's the day,
Hmm.
you know. Uh, that's what, life is like inside there. And then as people have been on here before and talked about, like we have these relationships with each other where these are our friends, these are the people we live with, these are our roommates,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, if you're in your early 20s, like you're trying to find out who you are, what you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna do in the world. Um, you don't know much,
Sure.
but you have a lot of enthusiasm and motivation, and as one of our mutual friends says, you're have lots of aim inhibited libido. Uh, you're not getting laid, so you need to go out and channel all of that energy into doing something.
Mhm.
Um, so yes, there's all of the ideology. Like we could go through a LaRouche pamphlet and talk about this, that, and the other thing.
Mhm.
Um, there obviously are serious, um, s- uh, you know, conditions of life in the organization that raise the question of whether it was a cult or not.
Sure.
Um, I won't touch on that. The only thing I'll say about that is that while I think there is a lot of strength to that argument, I also think it's not quite helpful if you want to understand, if you want to like an accurate understanding what was happening, you just need to be aware of the fact that when you say that, it can be a categorical judgment,
Sure.
meaning it can, once you say it, it's one thing,
Sure.
right? When in reality, anything that gets called a cult is gonna have certain characteristics, but it's also there are going to be lots of times when it doesn't have those characteristics.
Sure. Or
And
anti-characteristics.
there's going to be, people who have different experience. They have their perspective is different,
Sure.
right? Um, and that could be because they have a different like living arrangement,
Hmm.
you know, or just because they were part-time in a certain way, or
Sure. Different
there's
different offices they were worked out of, or all those things.
right. Um, it's also the case that, you know, I think for a lot of us to say definitively one way or another that it was a cult or not is uh, a way of making sense of and interpreting one's experience,
Hmm.
um, so that you know how to feel about it, so
Sure.
that you know how to think about it, so you know how to tell people about it. First year, a couple of years after I had been out of the organization, I didn't really know how to tell people what had happened.
Sure.
And
Like
I
how
felt,
much time you got?
yeah, you got 3 hours.
Yeah.
Let me describe this to you.
That's partially
We don't
why.
have you don't have a shared vocabulary through a shared discourse in which someone's going to understand contextually why you're saying it's a cult or not a cult,
Hmm.
right? Um, so yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Um,
Real quick on that. That's partial. I forget if I've said this publicly or not, but it's one of the smaller motivations for this whole project, this show and book, because it's so much easier as a shorthand when people do ask me that question. Oh, what was it like? Well, watch this 20-part video series if you really want to get like a taste of it, because it's such a long, such a complex, nuanced thing, you know. It was, and kind of to your point, like you can say, "Oh, I was in this cult," but and that maybe gives them some idea, but that's not really hardly any of the idea at all at the same time.
yeah, for some, I mean, and it, you know, it's how you expect people to react to that when you tell them. Because for a
Hmm.
while, I that was just my go-to way of explaining what I did
Hmm.
with people that I trusted enough to tell them that.
Sure.
Um, like you have you expect them to react in a certain way.
Hmm.
And then most people, first of all, most people don't know how to respond to that. They're just like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Hmm.
But like I like you. You
Sure.
seem fine.
Yeah.
Um, or like I know people who've like they've gotten dates out of that because like people were like, "Oh, you're so interesting." And of course, like other people might have gotten, like basically looked at like you need to go over here now.
Sure. Sure.
So, there's it's what I sort of expected is I expected this would be a shameful kind of thing.
Hmm.
Uh, and then to my surprise, most of the people I've created relationships with, friendships, etc.,
Yeah.
they really haven't cared.
Sure.
It's sort of been like, "Are you okay?"
Right. Right.
And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm okay. I just thought you should know this about me."
Sure.
And they're like,
Okay.
"Okay,
Right.
sure." It is a little weird to like, people may like I just said they're shrugging at that response, but like from my point of view, like for several years it was kind of a secret. Like I felt
Hmm.
like I was like hiding something from people.
Sure.
Um, and then you feel like you're doing something wrong
Sure.
by not telling people.
Hmm.
So, after I was going to school when I left, I gathered all my friends together one day and I said, I have an announcement. And then I proceeded to give them a 3.5 hour storytelling. And then it's just like, where did this come from?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, sure. Like, are you okay?
Right.
Is there something you need from like, didn't change anything
Sure.
with friendships. I mean, it added this like little weird thing. They knew this thing about me.
Sure.
Uh, and it can be like a joke, but
Hmm. Yeah.
otherwise,
That's interesting. On that real quick, and again, I can't remember if I've talked about this publicly or not, but talking to a lot of ex-members, and I think there was for a lot of people a lot of shame for different reasons. But one of the larger goals of this project has been to kind of reclaim the pride and the interesting histories we have, and the fact that, I mean, how many people do you meet that are like passionate enough about something to sacrifice so much for something, right? To give up a lot of your years of your life, give up a lot of your 20s, maybe all your 20s for some people, to give up school, at least at that time, to give up well-paying jobs, and it's, to give up living standard, et cetera, because you believe so strongly in this thing, and it does tend to, you know, the people that come out of it are people that have interesting stories, and in my experience, I'm less or I was less ashamed of my time in it, but it is a weird thing. Just like, how do you bring this up to somebody? Because it's just like so out of left field for your average person's experience, for someone, for one of us to have led such a odd life from their perspective. So, but yeah, I've wanted to sort of reclaim the level of pride in the fact that, and like pride of the things we tried to do. I think there is a nobility in the attempt for people. And then I wanted to get back to something kind of because you sort of rounded out a lot of this idea, but you were saying this thing about how at a certain point in your life, how you didn't feel you could like read a philosophical text or really make a cogent argument or be able to study. I think it's funny to counterpose that to the compliment I began with, which was,
uh-huh.
myself, who, I'm an airhead in all kinds of ways, but I have a certain level of intelligence. And then our mutual friend, who, to my mind, is one of the most brilliant people I've met in my life. And for the two of us to have the same reaction to you, for our experience to you in the organization, was, this guy is brilliant and super thorough. And like, I would never want to debate him. I would just, it could be on any topic, and I'm losing 100% because he's just so thorough and such a deep thinking human being. So just, I think that just kind of supports your overall point about maybe some of the things the organization provided to you, or the things like how you grew as a person within the movement, which yeah, it deserves to be said. The LA, I mean, someone's got to have pictures of the LA office. I want to like show people. It's just such a funny scene visually, but such a cool scene with, I mean, yeah, I remember it like 120 people, young people, just call it, early 20s, all passionate about different things, and it's just like such a vibe. You're like, whoa, you guys built a steam engine, you built in this topological map in Nawapa, and like you could tell me all about music, like great singers, like people that went on to actually sing opera, and you're sort of teaching that to everybody, and like everyone has that inside them. Like that is like it just blows your mind, and like especially coming from a position where maybe you just weren't sure and all that. So it's power. It's almost a drug. It's just got such a
Mhm.
intoxicative property to it. So but yeah, just that I think to buttress your point about our experience, our mutual friend and I is like, man, this Dave is brilliant. So for what that's worth, again, to bring up the compliment again, but.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Uh, there's a lot to talk about how I, like now I have a master's degree.
Hmm.
I wanted to get a PhD. I
Hmm.
decided to not do that, but it was necessary to do a lot of the things that I did in the organization to just learn how to be prepared enough
Hmm.
so that I could go to school.
Hmm.
Like
Sure, sure. Yeah.
um, you know, um, I did a sort of interview. I was put on the hot seat by some other mutual friends who were in the organization
Hmm.
uh, earlier this year. And that was a very long conversation that I sort of like told the whole arc of being in the organization.
Hmm.
And I was asked like what were the positive what I was asked what were you proud of doing?
Hmm.
And I don't know that there was anything I was proud of doing, but there were certainly things that were positive that I got out of the organization. So like I did learn how to really concentrate on something and read it or
Hmm.
work through an idea. When I joined this organization, I had math phobia. I was convinced I was an artsy person
Hmm.
and not a math person. I couldn't do that. And while that created a good deal of unnecessary stress for a couple of years,
Hmm.
like I didn't want to do the math stuff. I didn't want to try to understand this paper in on algebra or calculus
Hmm.
or like I did some fun things where like we read through this proto or like early academic journal
Hmm.
from the 1600s called the Acta Eruditorum or Eruditorum, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, and it had articles by early modern physicists doing experiments to understand light and to demonstrate that there are mathematical descriptions, or at least there's the behavior of light in certain conditions coheres with the mathematics that we have for it.
Sure.
And so, like, we went through and built those experiments,
Hmm.
and we did that. And that was interesting because it
Hmm.
brought up a question of why does light cohere with mathematics? Like, why does the mathematics uh, work so well?
Right.
You know, um, that's still a major philosophical question. No one, like
Sure.
no one has an answer for that. Like, but it works. It works really well. Um, But at a certain point, I had to face those fears of like, I can't do this math. And
Hmm.
I just like sat down and worked through some geometry until like I had figured things out.
Hmm.
And then I was able to say to myself, I can understand and do math. I work today as a tutor.
Hmm. I was gonna bring it up, but yeah, it's amazing that that's what you do.
So, like there's still kids like this. And so I have to help people to understand and see that they can do all these things. Like you're capable of, of understanding a lot of things you don't think you can.
Sure.
Um, I think I I I learned what it was like to experience personal growth.
Nice. That's huge.
I learned that you could say, I can't do this thing now. I'm gonna work every day at it. And then after years, I will be a different person who's able to do this thing.
Hmm.
Unless you're like a student athlete or, like you're a musician, uh, school doesn't like if you do fine at school, then you're never going to learn that like what it is to overcome a challenge and
Sure.
develop something in yourself that you didn't have before.
Hmm.
Um, at least that's my idea. Maybe that's a false generalization, but
I think it's
that's
pretty good. It's pretty close,
what
I think.
like so that I got that experience and so that later when I wanted to go to college, I was like, I can go to college.
Right.
I can do this thing. Um, yeah. I mean, obviously, I still have some of my best friends are the people who went through this experience with me.
Hmm.
And even when we disagree very strongly about certain things,
Oftentimes, frequently.
yeah, I'm still, like I love this person enough that, or these people, I love these
Mm.
people enough that like I'm it's gonna bother me, but I'm not gonna like block them.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know?
Yes.
Um, so there are other things to say. I'm just sort of I've gotten to the end of the
Good.
story I wanted to tell this
Okay.
time around.
Okay.
And if you want to have me back on to talk about other things, I'm happy to come back on.
I would love for you to come back on. Yeah. No, thank you so much. That's I was going to make the point if you didn't that I personally think it's just amazing that you ended up becoming a tutor to young people. Especially given the story you just told, which I wasn't aware of a lot of that, and I appreciate you sharing it. But no, I
Like here's just a funny anecdote about that. Like one of the things that we did um, to recruit young people was we, as members of the LaRouche movement, the youth movement, we would go out and we would ask people to double the square.
hmm.
This is a basic geometry problem that shows up in the Meno dialogue from Plato.
Hmm.
Plato's point is not that important for this.
Sure.
The point we were making is like you don't have to learn a, you don't have to be told how to do things. You can figure things out.
Sure.
Um, and that kind of learning is valuable.
Hmm.
I think we were saying that's the only real kind of learning, which is not true.
Sure.
Uh, it's not the most important, but it is a very personally self-gratifying way of learning.
Hmm.
So, if you've never done that, go try to do that if you're curious. But I was I had a fourth grade girl come in yesterday, and she comes to the company I work for help with math and like extra enrichment.
Hmm.
And it's the end of the school year right now. There's like a week left for
Hmm.
some of these kids, 2 weeks for some other kids. She had no homework, so it's like, what are we doing? And so I was like, I have an idea. Let's just do some explore. We're gonna explore some stuff about numbers. Um, there are there's a area of numbers called figure eight numbers or polygonal numbers. And basically what you do is you represent the numbers with dots. Like you draw little dots,
Hmm.
right? And for different numbers, you can arrange those dots in different polygonal ways. So, the number two is just going to be a rectangle because it's going to have two dots next to each other.
Hmm.
But four, you could have a rectangle of four dots and you can have a square of four dots.
Hmm.
And as you go on, there are other numbers. There are triangles, pentagons, etc. All these regular polygons.
Hmm.
So we went up to nine and we drew these out. And then, I asked her, like, hey, you've learned about prime numbers versus composite numbers. Which one of these are prime? What do we learn from this? Which ones are the odd numbers? Is there anything odd about the odd numbers? Um, how about the triangular numbers? This and
Hmm.
that. And then, I said, well, these are all shapes, but we made them with lines. Do you know what area is? And so she kind of like she knew what a shape was, but she didn't understand the concept of area.
Hmm.
So we took a straight line and we just dragged it. We took like a marker and we dragged it across the paper to
Hmm.
show that if you start with a line and you drag it in another direction, you'll get an area,
Hmm.
right? And then we did this little thing where it was like, if you draw a line, you can go forwards and backwards. If you want to go sideways, you need another line, and that's orthogonal to it.
Hmm.
Uh, and after this, we drew a square, and I said, this is a square. It has an area that's 1 times 1. I want you to find me a square that has an area of 2. And inevitably, we went through the same sort of steps that almost everyone goes through.
Since Plato's
Um,
time.
yeah, it's very sort of an intuitive set of steps
Hmm.
based on ideas you already have. And then when we found it, I was like, look, here we have a square. It has an area of 2. And we flipped the paper over, and I was like, here, look, this is the figure eight number for 2, but we don't have a square. We can't make a square with just these dots.
Hmm.
Isn't that weird? It's like, what do you think that means? And then our time was up, so we kind of
Uh,
ended on a cliffhanger. But
nice.
it's very fun. Like if someone is interested or curious about things, especially if they're young, then they're just absorbing everything that you give them that isn't too much work or too boring. Then, you know, these things they're great. They're naturally kind of stimulating.
Hmm.
Um, so I still use a lot of these things, a lot of these like
Sure.
we called them pedagogicals,
Hmm. Training tools.
but they're just uh they're like little conceptual prompts,
Hmm.
right? If you have a writing prompt, they're a
Right.
little conceptual prompt, like a little puzzle to figure out.
Hmm.
Um, and they introduce people to a lot of big ideas that you
Hmm.
can't just communicate by doubling the square or drawing shapes with dots, but they can be great ways of pulling people in, and that's how they pulled so many of us in.
Sure.
So anyway, that's just a funny little anecdote.
That's fun. I appreciate it. Nice.
Anyway, great
Yeah.
talking to you.
Likewise, Dave. Thank you. Thank you again for coming on. Yeah, I would love to have you back on because I know you have a lot of things to say. So yeah, down the future, hopefully we could do that. Do you have any closing thoughts for our audience?
Um, no, but I'm still trying to think of what the craziest things I've ever heard of.
That's right. That's right. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Do you have any or any like funny things people said come to mind?
Not off the top of my
Okay,
head.
no worries,
I
no
don't
worries.
think of
It's a bad promptu thing. No worries. So okay,
That's okay.
all right. Well, thanks again, David. We will be in touch.
Yeah, great.